today, which is we need to get from Elijah to Jesus today. All right? Yeah. So, in the Bible, in the context of things, we'll just start with kind of a timeline from Genesis all the way through towards where we pick up today, along through where we're going to end up next week, which is the birth of Christ. Okay? So, by most people's historicity, they would say that the Garden of Eden incident, so we don't know how long they lived in the Garden of Eden before they sinned. Okay? So, and it's not a salvation issue to argue about that. Okay? As far as I'm concerned, I ascribe to a theory called the gap theory when it comes to the Bible, which means that between verse 1 in the Bible and verse 2 in the Bible was what I believe would probably be a period of 3.75 billion years. Okay? So the very first verse in the Bible is, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the second verse begins with the word, now. Now the earth was formless and void. So they want to tell us the story of creation. But the first thing it says is, by the way, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That was, and I'm thinking that was a long time ago. And then it says the word now. Now it's going to tell the account of how God made people. We also don't know how long Adam and Eve were in the garden. Sometimes when people see the earth, they're called, some people believe in like a young earth, that God, when God created earth, He made it to look old, but it's not actually old. And that's called young earth theory. I'm an old earth theorist, gap theorist, which means I believe that the universe is actually 3.75 billion years old. And I believe that theism, or the Bible, actually has a place for that. And that one of the ways that we do that is either between verse 1 and verse 2, there's that period of time, or we never know how long Adam and Eve lived in the garden before they actually sinned. Right? And without the fall, there wasn't actually necessarily the idea of time, and timeliness would be different. Anyway, that's all one. We know that the sequence of events after the fall, Adam and Eve start having kids. That was 4,000 BC. Okay, so that's 6,000 years ago. When you think on the scale, it's kind of cool to see the way that everything plays out. Because oftentimes, like, we get certain stories and we just think like, well, there's then, and we don't know what they go alongside of in history. You know, like the end of the era of the prophets, when we rebuilt the second temple period, I'll talk about that. That was during the reign of Alexander the Great. But since we have the Bible and we have ancient history, we very rarely tie them together and go, this is what was happening in the world at this time. And they actually can complement one another. So, 4,000 BC, you've got the Genesis account. You've got the, right after Adam and Eve, you have Adam and Eve moving all the way to the flood. The flood happened in 2350 BC. Okay? So again, this is archaeologically sound, everything else like that. Some people go, well, the way that these things happened, the reason that there's all these geological timescales and everything else like that, well, the geological formations that we have also could be predicated upon the fact that there is, on any given piece of land, a mile of water above it, 2 miles of water above it, 5 miles of water on it. It creates those geological formations. Okay, so that's 2350 BC. We see the destruction of the world by the flood. So we get Noah's Ark, right? That's Genesis chapter 6. The crazy part is between Genesis 3 and Genesis 6, there is literally a gap as big as Genesis 6 to today. Well, Genesis 6 towards the rest of the Bible, at least. And then there's almost the exact same gap from the Bible to today. It's a 2,000-year period. For 2,000 years between Genesis 3 and Genesis 6, 2,000 years. 2,000 years between Genesis 6 and Matthew, where Jesus appears. And then 2,000 years from Matthew to you sitting here today. Okay? So that period of time. Flood is 2350. 200 years after the flood is Abraham. Is where Abraham shows up. That's in about 2165 BC. Okay? And he lives until 1990 BC. That means right around that era is where there was the lineage started, where we talk about the Abrahamic covenant. Abraham, his firstborn son's name is Abraham, and then Isaac. Good. Ishmael, yeah, but from the wrong woman. Good. I should have clarified that. You're actually right. Ishmael, but then God says, no, I want my lineage to go through the person that I built for your wife. That's the word I was looking for. Spouse, wife. And her name is Sarah, not Hagar. If you guys are confused right now, it's probably because you missed the series that we've had so far. You can watch all these things on nceleventwelve.com. You can catch up on what we're doing. So this might sound like mumbo jumbo. Generally, I would explain everything, but since we've done it, we don't have time, because if I did it, then we'd literally need hours and hours and hours to do that. Okay? So Abraham gives birth to Isaac. Isaac, then comes his descendant named Jacob. Jacob has 12 sons. The second youngest, his name is Joseph. Joseph is sold into slavery in Egypt. And this is around the foundation of Egypt. Egypt was actually founded in 1870 BC. Joseph becomes enslaved in Egypt in 1750 BC. So you see, by the time when Joseph gets there, this is a young nation. This nation's right around 100 or so years old. It's not very old. It's not very founded. Joseph, the way that he was able to predict the famine and get all the money back into Egypt is when Egypt blew up to become a superpower. Okay? So that's 1750. 100 years later is when a new Pharaoh rises up, and all the Israelites are in the land of Egypt, and 100 years later that Pharaoh decides that he's going to enslave the Hebrew people. So we have, Egypt is founded in 1870. In 1750, Joseph moves and he helps save Egypt. In 1650, by that time, all the Hebrew people have become enslaved. Now they're all enslaved in Egypt. Until 1530, when a man named Moses is born. Moses, we've heard a lot about him. And close to almost a whole lifetime later, as far as we're concerned, is the Exodus. And that's in 1450, about 1450. Okay, so about 1450 BC is when there's the parting of the Red Sea. The Israelites go across on dry land. The army of the Egyptians is swallowed up. That's in 1450. Now, he's got all the people out in the desert, right? And it starts what's called the 40 years of wandering. Because the Israelites went to spy on a land called Canaan, which was the promised land, they sent 12 spies. God said, this is the land I've already given you. So they send 12 dudes, and these dudes go, and they look at it, and they go, oh shoot, we're not moving there. They're big people. Like, they're going to eat us. We hate it. They're like giants. Okay? In fact, one of the translations says, it was like we were grasshoppers compared to them. So they run back to the Israelite people, and they go, we can't move into the promised land. They're too big. And God curses them and says, because you don't believe in me, you're going to spend 40 years wandering in the desert. All right? You're not going to enter the promised land. So, in the year 1400 is when finally the Israelites have conquered the whole land of Canaan, and they've settled down in the promised land, the plan that God had made for them. Okay? That promised land of Canaan is what we know today to be the land of Israel. More specifically, in Israel, the city of Jerusalem. Okay? So that's how it plays into history. Okay? That's why today, the hub of Jews in the world is still here. It's been that way for now 3,600 years almost. Okay? So the reason that there's Jews there today is because 1400 BC is when they're there. Okay? Good. Then, after they've conquered that land, then they all settle down, they're like, yay, this is the land that God has given us. We're happy here. We're all healthy. This is fantastic. God goes, you know what? Since I've given you the 10 Commandments, you guys don't need kings. All you need is exactly what we have in America. What do we have? Judges. We have a judicial system. We have people who interpret the laws. Right? So we take our cases before them, and then they judge it. This is what Israel had. God says, I'm your king. You don't need a king like the rest of the nations. You just need judges to help carry out the law. So for 400 years, people like Deborah were reigning judges of Israel, and all they would do is they would look over the people. God was the king. They would interpret the laws, and they would cast judgment on people. Well, after 400 years, the Israelites said, man, everyone else around us has kings. We want kings. And thus began what we know in history, not just biblical history, but all of history, as the Age of Kings. Because Israel cried out and said, we want a physical king. God, we get that you're a king, but we don't want judges anymore. Everyone else has a king. Why can't we have a king? Okay? And that happens for 165 years. For 165 years, there's a united kingdom. Okay? The first king of Israel, when they go, we really want more than a judge, we just want a king. God looks down on the people, and there's a man who stood a head taller than everybody else, and his name was Saul. Saul, not a good king. Saul ends up going through his kingship, and God anoints somebody else at the end of Saul's life to become the next king. His name was David. So the age of the divide, we call it the United Kingdom. The only reason we call it the United Kingdom is because there's going to be another period right after here called the Divided Kingdom. During the United Kingdom, what we know as Israel was all together, just called Israel. It was governed by one king, Saul, David, and then David's son named Solomon. Solomon is who God uses to build his temple in Jerusalem. The same temple that I can go visit today. It's still there. It's not standing because it's been ruined half a dozen times. Right? Not completely, but it's been decimated 2 times. But it gets ransacked by everyone, they burn it down. It's like everyone's favorite thing to do in the engineering is to burn the temple. Because it belongs to God. It's God's temple. Okay? So this temple that was built during the United Kingdom thousands of years ago still is there today. You can go look at it. Okay? That is in the biblical account. That's around the year 1000. Okay? Saul, David, and then Solomon. Well, Solomon gives birth to a couple of kids. Anyone? For trivia points, who knows their names?
Absalom. I don't know.
It's okay. The 2 that are going to become the kings of the northern kingdom. So now the kingdom's going to split. They're going to go, whoop! There's going to be a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom. Why? Because they don't agree on how they should be ruled. So one of the kingdom is ruled by a man named Rehoboam, and the other kingdom is ruled by Jeroboam. If you guys are new to church, you guys are going like, what the heck are you talking about? That's okay. What you need to understand is most of us are learning this right now. So if you're thinking, man, I'm way behind. No, you're not. How many of you are like, yeah, I knew all that information before you even said it. I had this thing down pat. Okay, see, I want you guys to get the understanding here. No one here is going, oh, old information. Okay, good. This is good for us to know. All right? That's in 1000. Then, that's when the construction of the temple happens. Okay? They divide. They get a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom. All right? The southern kingdom, the northern kingdom is where the temple is built. So the southern kingdom, they don't have a temple. So their king decides, I'm going to build a temple too. In a place called Dan, or Lachish. Okay? You can go here today. I went here last January. In a place called, he still built a fake temple there. But instead of offering sacrifices to the God of the Hebrew people, he offered sacrifices to whomever the frick he wanted to. They looked, today, you can go, there's still a pit of bones where people that are thousands and thousands of years old. This stuff in Scripture, we can go, we dug it up. It's there. It says this is the city of Dan ruled by Jeroboam and the temple, whatever the crap it's called. Okay? And there's still this fake temple that talks about in Scripture. There's pig bones in there. There's children's bones in there. From goats, all these different animals. Okay? Because they got it wrong. So God goes, you know what? I'm sick of it. You guys keep doing this division and you're sacrificing to the wrong God. You're doing worship ceremonies to Baal and all these other gods. I'm done. So methodically, each of these kingdoms is then going to get overpowered and taken out. The northern kingdom only lasts for 200 years. Okay? The southern kingdom is going to last 340, but they're both going to get knocked out. The northern kingdom gets taken by a group of people called the other one. Assyrians. Good. Again, if you're like, it's okay. We don't know this stuff. We never study it. The Assyrians take over the northern kingdom. And then a group comes and takes out the southern kingdom, and they're known as the Babylonians. The Babylonians. So they take all the Jews from Israel, and they take them to Babylon. And while they're in Babylon, this is where we get all these stories from the Old Testament, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You might know that story. Daniel in the lion's den. These are all stories of God's holy people who have now been taken captive in a land that isn't their own. That's why Daniel's not allowed to pray to God. That's why Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are asked to pray to the Persian god or to King Nebuchadnezzar, and they refuse, and they're thrown into the fiery furnace. All these stories that we hear, the reason that those stories exist is because the Jews are now captive by Babylon. So that's where all these stories come from, while they're in captivity. This happens until another king comes and takes over Babylon. The next world power in history is a group called the Persians. Yeah, the Persians, led by a man named... Nope, he's Greek. If you've ever seen... There it is. If you've seen 300, you know the answer to this one. Okay? So the Persians are going to come and they're going to take over. When the Persians take over, there's a man named Cyrus who says, you know what? We really shouldn't be oppressing these Jews. If they are worshiping their God, because the Persians were polytheistic, they believed we should let them go worship their own God. So he actually lets the Jews go back to Israel and rebuild their civilization, including the temple. So after the temple was destroyed by the Babylonians, the Persians come over and take over the Babylonians, and then the Persians go, you know what? The Jews should get to go worship again in their own temple. So he sends them back. And he sends them back to Israel, and that's how the Jews are reestablished in the city of Jerusalem, in the nation of Israel. After he sends them back, the Jews are just living and they're enjoying their lives. They end up rebuilding the temple in 590 BC, or before that. But in 590 BC, the temple is destroyed. Okay? And it's a lot of stuff to go over. I totally understand that. In 539 is when the Israelites get to return to Jerusalem. Okay? The next year, in 538, the temple begins to be rebuilt. And then Persia is going to reign until the year 330 BC. This is where most of our history books catch up, because this is most of the history that has implications for America. Okay? At least American history, even though it doesn't directly affect us, it does indirectly. In the year 330, there arises a world power known as Greece. Greece is coming hot. You guys ever seen 300? Persia and Xerxes come and take out all the Spartans of Greece, right? And then what happens is Greece comes together with and they rise up, Alexander the Great, and they overthrow Persia. And that's the conquest. That's 330. 336 is actually when they start to rise, and then 330 is when they take over Persia. They take over the Persians in the ancient Near East. And then, after that, there comes the world power that's going to remain in power until Jesus is born. A group known as Rome. Rome comes in. They're coming in hot. Okay? But from the Persians taking over, that's 530 or so BC, until the birth of Jesus, the Bible is mute. It doesn't say anything. There's nothing there. Now, the books towards the end of the Old Testament are all called prophetic books. They're written by the prophets. Because all along, whenever God had a civilization of people, whenever he was working with the Israelites, he always would send someone that would be the mouthpiece of God. So every time, even the Israelites had judges, he had a prophet. When they had a king, he had a prophet. When the nation was united, he had a prophet. When it was divided, guess what he had? 2 prophets. It was imperative to God that every time he had a group of people, someone carries the word. Someone carries the baton of faith. Someone says, shouldn't be doing that. Someone is in connection with God that is helping the people on where to go, even to their own destruction. In fact, when Israel first falls under a king named, this was my sermon last year in Big Church, Zedekiah. Zedekiah is the Israelite king that causes it to fall. I know, he's the one who loses Babylon. Anyway, so Jeremiah is his prophet. Jeremiah the whole time is going, you better surrender, you better do this, you better do that. And he goes, you know what? Forget it. Don't tell me what to do. That is why Israel constantly finds themselves. You guys are going, but I thought the Israelites were God's chosen people. I thought the Hebrews were God's chosen people. I thought the Jews were God's chosen people. All the same group, by the way, so those aren't distinctions right there. Same group of people, known by different things over the centuries. God allows people, this is something that C.S. Lewis writes, he lets his people have what they're asking for, almost always, even to the point of our own death. God is a loving God, he's a just God, but he does have a unique ability to go, what do you want? It's exactly what you have. What do you want? We don't want to listen to you, God. We don't want anything to do with you, God. You got it. Here comes Babylon. God, we want to follow you. We want to be after you. We want to be right with you. It says at that point, there's a story in the Old Testament where Israel gets really afraid they're going to be taken over. And it says God slaughters 180,000 people overnight. It turns out that God kind of goes, that's what you're looking for, then that's what you're going to get. If you want to be with me, then guess what you're going to get? You're going to be with me. When you don't want anything to do with me, you're not anything to do with me. But Israel, don't get this twisted. You are not still a nation because you are powerful. You are only a nation because I am your God. Which speaks to us today. I am not who I am because I'm great. I am only who I am because of who God is. There's a lot of history there. I know I had to catch up a lot. There's a lot of nerdy stuff going on. But I want to kind of land on this point that we don't really ever talk about. And I think it's kind of a shame, and it's probably my own fault. But this idea of people who have held and have passed the baton of faith. The prophets. A prophet doesn't mean you necessarily have to tell the future. It means you just tell the truth. We have a horrible habit in America of not honoring the prophets among us. Not honoring the legacy of people. For you to be sitting here today, one or two things happen. Either your parents were believers who, by all likelihood, their parents were believers whose their parents, by likelihood, I'm talking likelihood, I'm not saying in every situation. Some of you are first generation Christians. Some of you have picked up the baton of faith and because it's been sitting in the ground in your family for generation after generation after generation. And you've said, from here on out, as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. And some of us have had it passed down from those before us. But here's what I know. Someone, for you to be sitting there, had to look in the face of culture and say, I'm going to follow God. Even if it's not popular, if it's not normal, if it's not easy, I'm going to follow God. We do a terrible job of honoring those people that the Bible says we should be giving great praise and legacy to. Not worship. Only God deserves our worship. But how good are we at thanking those who are the prophets in our life, who have carried the baton of faith for our family? Your parents might be numbskulls, but if your parents brought you up in church, there was something very important in their brain that you were brought up in church too. That's a legacy of faith that you have. We do such a bad job about thanking those kind of people. This is a fairly self-serving message, and let me identify that before we continue. That maybe some of you are going, you're kind of a prophet to us. So what are you talking about? I think that's why we don't ever teach about this, because someone's got to get up and be awkward. It's going to be me. The great thing about the way that we do church here at North Coast Church is the prophets in your life. We've built it to not just be me or Steve or Chonch or Caleb. We have a small group system. Someone is taking 2 hours out of their week every week in their job and family and social settings to sit with you and simply be counted among the faithful prophets of history. We don't call them prophets. They're just, It's not a prophet. That's not a prophet. That's just my small group leader. That's a prophet. They have taken the time to carry the baton of faith to make sure that it clicks with you. That you will one day say, as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. Here's how the Hebrews did that, and here's what I'm going to challenge you guys to do. If you have your Bibles, turn to 1 Samuel chapter 7. We just went through the whole history of the Old Testament, so we're actually going back in time now. But I'm doing it to show you guys something. One thing that my mentor taught me that I want to be teaching you guys too. 1 Samuel chapter 7. It's going to be towards the beginning of your Bibles. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel is that first part. There's a 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles. There's a lot of 1st and 2nd. 1st and 2nd Samuel is the first of the 1st and 2nd towards the beginning of the Bible. Okay? You can use your table of contents at the beginning of your Bible to find it. If you have your iPod, iPhone, whatever, you can just put in 1 Sam 7, and it'll take you to 1 Samuel chapter 7. 1 Samuel 7. Here's what they did in order to show honor to those who had carried the legacy, including God himself. Beginning at verse, let's start at verse 5. Then Samuel said, assemble all Israel at Mizpah, and I will intercede with the Lord for you. Okay? Who is Samuel? He is a prophet. Okay? He, in the nation of Israel at this time, they have their kings, and every king had a prophet. The king would rule the people, and the prophet would talk to God until the king had to rule the people. In this generation, their prophet was Samuel. Here's what he writes about. When they had assembled at Mizpah, in verse 6, they drew water and poured it out before the Lord. On that day they fasted, and there they confessed, we have sinned against the Lord. Now Samuel was serving as leader of Israel at Mizpah. When the Philistines, that's the enemy of Israel, when the Philistines heard that Israel had assembled at Mizpah, the rulers of the Philistines came up to attack them. When the Israelites heard of it, they were afraid because of the Philistines. They said to Samuel, do not stop crying out to the Lord our God for us, that he may rescue us from the hand of the Philistines. Then Samuel took a suckling lamb and sacrificed it as a whole burnt offering to the Lord. He cried out to the Lord on Israel's behalf, and the Lord answered him. So in other words, they asked Samuel, you're the prophet. Please beg on our behalf that God spares us. This huge Philistine army, this tiny Israelite nation, is now staring at this huge Philistine army about to get decimated. And they go, please pray because we have no other shot. Verse 10. While Samuel was sacrificing the burnt offering, the Philistines drew near to engage Israel in battle. But that day the Lord thundered with loud thunder against the Philistines and threw them into such a panic that they were routed before the Israelites. The men of Israel rushed out of Mizpah and pursued the Philistines, slaughtering them along the way to a point below Beth-kar. Then Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shen. He named it Ebenezer, saying, thus far the Lord has helped us. So the Philistines were subdued and they stopped invading Israel's territory. You guys are like, wait, what? Does that have to do with anything? Did he read the wrong verse? No, I didn't. Okay? In the middle of that, I think is something that we can carry as a practice for this generation. Okay? It's a simple phrase. I hate that Charles Dickens used this word because I would love to name my kid this, but you can't, because now everyone thinks when you name your kid Ebenezer, what do they always think of? Scrooge, which sucks, because the name means look. Look how God has helped us thus far. In other words, observe the faithfulness of our God. That's what the name Ebenezer means. Ebenezer. The Lord has helped us to this point. That's what it means in Hebrew. What an Ebenezer was to the people of Israel was called a helpstone. Whenever they would get a victory, whenever they would learn something, whenever they had a revelation from God, they would set up an altar or an Ebenezer. They would set up a helpstone. And they would go, look at God's faithfulness. And they would carry those Ebenezers around, and they would be attached to the caravan of the Israelites as they wandered and moved and did everything. So they were constantly reminded of God's faithfulness. My challenge to you guys is this. When God pulls through in your life, what do we do to remember it? I think we do such a terrible job of remembering and making help stones and showing our gratitude and all these other things, that when we come across trial, we look back and go, God's never been there for me. Because we're forgetful people. With the prophets in your life, with the truth tellers, with those who are teaching you, with every circumstance where God comes through in the clutch, every night when you go to bed continually in a house of people that love you, or you don't, but you're still here, we should always be setting up these things, these help stones, and whatever it might be. When I was in college, there was kind of a scary time where the doctors didn't really know what was going on with me, and they thought some scary stuff was going on, and I ended up going for a checkup, and they found some different stuff, masses and stuff like that, where they shouldn't be. And my friends and I were freaking out. We were praying, and my family was praying, and it was nuts. And then I go, and they send off these scans and everything to UCLA to find out what was going on. And UCLA gets them, and they're like, What's wrong? Like, the masses, there's no masses. What are you talking about? So they sent them, and then as soon as they arrived, they were like, guys, I think you're high. There's no masses on this thing. The doctor's like, no, look it up. And they're like, oh, there aren't any. They scanned again. There's nothing there. And so I tell my mentor's just crying, and he's so excited, and everyone was afraid. And he goes, how are you going to Ebenezer this? And I was like, what are you talking about? And he showed me that verse. And he made me make this little trophy thing that basically was just like, look, the Lord helped me at this point. Look, the Lord helped me right there. Some of the people in your life need to be Ebenezers for you. And the way that you show reverence towards someone who's helped you is through an attitude of thankfulness and gratefulness. Until you become an adult, you don't get what adults give up to be a mentor for you guys. And I'm the least of them, because this is my job. But my job isn't to be a small group leader. I do it because I love to pour into students. We're the only pastoral staff at North Coast that also takes small groups. We just love being with small groups. We love being with students. But the Joe Greens, the Dianas, the Pages, the Cassidys, the people who are pouring into you week after week, I think it becomes so mundane for us, 'cause it's been happening for so long, that we forget that someone has decided to make sure the baton of faith is passed on. My two challenges to you are this. How can you honor the prophets in your life? And how can you honor the situations in your life where you have been helped thus far? It could be a picture. It could be an Instagram post. I know it sounds awful, but those are the new things that live forever, right? Look, you can literally scroll back through all the times that God has been there for you. Hashtag Ebenezer. Right? It's just really simple ways of going, every time you sit in a situation, you go, I'm not sure if God's going to be there for me in this last one. You scroll back through and go, oh yeah, never mind. He's faithful. Never gives up, right? We sing that song all the time. How often do we give ourselves museums to his faithfulness in our life? Because what Satan wants to do is he wants to give us short memories. And when we're coming up against it, we go, yeah, you know what, you're right. I don't feel like God's really been there for me in my life. Because in those moments, we don't take the time to set up an Ebenezer. There's a really, the last thing I'm going to say, there's a really famous song, Come Thou Fount. You ever heard that? Come Thou Fount of every blessing hitherto. It's really old. I'm like hundreds of years old. But verse 2 starts with, here I raise my Ebenezer, hitherto thy help I've come. And basically saying, like, look, this is the faithfulness of God. Those are my challenges for you. Will you honor the prophets in your life who want to carry the baton of faith? And you know what happens when you do that? They tend to remain prophets. The fastest way to tear somebody down and have them stop caring about pouring in the next generation is for them to think that they're not making a difference. They only know they're making a difference if you show it. You show gratitude. And secondly, set up help stones. Set up Ebenezers. Set up museums of God's faithfulness in your life. Guys, and it sounds stupid, and I know you're like 16, 17, 18 years old, but imagine getting to show your kids, like your Ebenezer. Like, this is the God's faithfulness. The reason that you're here, Shiloh, or whatever you name your kid, and I don't know what you name your kid. You like that name? That's corny, Mom. The reason that you're here is for the God's faithfulness. Look, that's my challenge to you guys. The problem with Israel all throughout their history is as soon as something went wrong, they always tried to run back to slavery. They always tried to run back to pagan gods. They always started worshiping Baal. They rejected their prophets, and they stopped building altars and helpstones. If we want to be consistent in our faithfulness, we have to remember the consistency of His faithfulness and the prophets who teach about it. Let's pray. God, thank you for helping us up to this point. Thanks for your faithfulness. We're sorry for those times, both with your people who are our prophets, who you have sent to carry that baton of faith, that we haven't shown them reverence or gratitude or done anything for them or whatever it might be. And the second part of that is that we haven't remembered your faithfulness. That time and time again you come through. Whether from the start or in the clutch, we can forget that so easily. May we not be deceived by the devil's schemes, and reminding ourselves every day of how faithful you've been. Let me pray. Amen. Remember, no growth.